Have you ever stopped to consider this? You see, because I'm an Earth scientist, I have. And I think the geology of Red Dead Redemption 2 has been wildly underappreciated in the past, which is why I'm making this video. Tell you all about the rocks that Rockstar placed in Red Dead Redemption 2. Like everyone who plays this game, shortly after starting my playthrough, I ended up in Valentine, a charming little town situated at the foothills of the Amberino mountain range, and what immediately struck me were the blindingly bright cliffs that surround the town. From their looks, I assumed I was dealing with some kind of limestone or dolomite, both of which would be classified as evaporites. So far so good, but why do I think this is odd? Well, in general, this type of rock forms when a shallow ocean basin in warm conditions evaporates its water, leaving behind the minerals that were in solution. I've always registered Valentine as a little mountain town, but this would mean that the area was actually completely underwater in the past. Though it has to be said that true distance is often hard to gauge in games because to make areas, well, playable, developers often compress scale, something we see both in Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 5, so maybe that threw off my perception of where Valentine was situated. Returning to the rock face, the fine texture and thick layers suggest to me that we are indeed dealing with limestone, remarkably thick layers at that. For these to form, not only were conditions warm, but the water was also likely to be largely undisturbed. Imagine a picturesque lagoon. But because I was still not completely convinced, I needed to verify to the best of my abilities that this assessment was in the ballpark of correct. What I wanted was to find more hints of an ocean seabed, so as I went looking around Valentine, I found a steep cliff leading into a lower plain. If I'm lucky, this is supposed to be a continental shelf. Conceptually, this is where we leave the shallow ocean and move into a deep marine regime. And now, the search for an indicator of deep marine sedimentation was on. I was hoping to find marine deep-sea sediment, which is formed when fine silica shells from little creatures called diatoms in the radial area gently fall to the bottom of the ocean. I was specifically looking for those because there is a certain depth called the CCD, the carbonate compensation depth, where calcium carbonate shells of plankton and other marine residents start dissolving due to the increase in water pressure and CO2 levels at depth. That means we can no longer have limestone formations since the seawater takes up that material. That leaves space for other rocks like radiolorite. To my surprise, I was actually completely unable to find concrete evidence that the formations I looked at were deep-sea sediment, but I would like to believe them to be just that. Based on these observations, I concluded that I was in fact standing at the bottom of what once was an ocean. If you feel like this conclusion was somewhat arbitrary, don't worry, I feel the same way. But still, intrigued by my earlier findings, I had to know more. If I could find hints of seafloor spreading, I could confirm this area to be a former ocean basin. Now, seafloor spreading is what we call the process at the ridges in the middle of our oceans, where magma from inside the Earth gets pushed to the surface, coming into contact with the oceans. When this happens, we form new fresh crust and push the tectonic plates out and towards the continents. The specific kind of rock formations that we find forming at these mid-ocean ridges are called ophiolite. To find those, I had to make a decision in which direction to explore. It would make sense to go further south towards the traces of deep ocean. So, naturally, the next step in exploring the geology of Red Dead Redemption 2 was to go straight north into Amberino. Not far from Valentine, after crossing the Dakota River, I immediately noticed a change in the geology. The sedimentary rocks that we found earlier appear to be pierced by dark-colored rocks. This dark-colored rock must have been created as magma of high magnesium and iron content, called mafic, broke through the layers from below. A bit further up we find basalt columns, which are created when lava cools quickly under certain conditions, for example when it surfaces at the bottom of the sea or even in open air. What exactly caused this is not quite clear to me, but my guess is that the interaction between the continental and the marine plate lifted the hot material such that it cooled quicker than under normal circumstances. Following the path further leads us higher up into the mountains, where the mafic rock slowly gets replaced with other rocks that have undergone more differentiation. In geology, differentiation happens as hot magma cools down. When crystals form, the chemical composition of the uncrystallized magma keeps changing as certain minerals fall out of solution more preferentially than others. We call this process of minerals forming in a predictable order differentiation. For us, this means that the composition of the rocks here is different, less mafic, meaning containing less of the elements that make up darker colored rock, because those elements have crystallized out at an earlier stage. At the aptly named Granite Pass is where we can then see the change from the basaltic into a more granitic regime. To see whether I could find more changes in the rock composition, I ventured deeper into Amberino, quietly taking in the scenery. I didn't really expect anything out of the ordinary until I came across this. These are the Kotora Springs, located high up in the Grizzlies, beautifully bubbling away and, dare I say, perfect for a little mountain retreat. However, thoughts of vacationing aside, these pose a problem. If you think about this spring a bit longer, you might start to ask yourself where all this hot water even comes from. Now, there are a few possibilities, but in essence they all involve water and a source of heat. The main question then becomes, what is the source of this heat? There are basically two possibilities. Number one, as you descend through the layers of the Earth, the surrounding material becomes warmer. This is because heat from the Earth's core slowly creeps out towards the surface. While this is not something you typically feel at the surface, if channels and cracks were to propagate deep enough into the rocks, this could feasibly lead to warm water being circulated back up into our hot springs. As for possibility number two, a magma chamber. Now, I think that the more likely explanation for the hot water of these springs here lies in a magma chamber right below them, not unlike the ones found at Yellowstone. I believe that there is or was a volcanic hotspot in this place that left us with big old blobs of hot rock. This is because I occasionally found layers that have been vertically broken by what appear to be fresh magma. This can happen in proximity to magma chambers and is an indication that the so-called intrusion came after the initial formation of the bedrock. If there really was a hotspot that caused all this though, I needed definitive proof of its existence. I needed to find an irrefutable mark of magma breaking through the Earth's surface and creating something where there was previously nothing. I needed a volcano. I traveled far, from the freezing valleys of Spider Gorge to the scorching plains in New Austin, back across Flatiron Lake through the marshes of Lemoyne and up to Annesburg. From there, across the Grizzlies, I returned to Valentine. I've searched the lands and the waters and found it all, from lost towns to Viking remains, strange artifacts and remnants, a meteorite, and even alien markings. But what escaped me still was that damn volcano. That was until the Red Dead Redemption 2 story took me to Guarma. As I arrived there, together with Arthur, I spotted it, far on the horizon, the outline of a volcano. Unfortunately, the story became pretty hectic and I accidentally left the island before I could fully explore it. However, thanks to the marvels of modern technology and the hard work of some brave adventurers, we have archived footage of Guarma's summits. In addition, thanks to the efforts of a mapmaker named Dapsor, we are able to look at a satellite view of the island. What immediately becomes clear is that Guarma is in fact a volcanic island. Right in the middle we can find the tall mountain-like structures that delineate our volcano. What then struck my eye was that we can see two distinct crater rings, with the smaller one located somewhat within the perimeter of the larger ring. This means that there were at least two separate eruptions, because the smaller crater could only be visible if its eruption happened after the ones that created the larger crater. You can also see that parts of the larger crater got erased by the eruption that caused the smaller crater. That said, it's actually highly likely that there were many more eruptions in the past because this whole island seems to be made up of a shield volcano. This type of volcano is characterized by continuous outflows of low viscosity lava, which then presumably resulted in the formation of the island of Guarma. Interestingly, in the middle of the most recent crater, we find a little dome. I point this out because the caldera, meaning the collapsed middle of the crater, does not feature such a dome without reason. Sometimes it's simply piled up sediment, but because we do not have a lake in this crater, I believe that the previously emptied magma chamber below the volcano might have started to fill up again, which then pushed up some of the material. I'm not saying that this volcano will erupt anytime soon, but the presence of magma would show that we are in a tectonically active region, slightly increasing the support for our earlier claims about the Kotora hot springs being heated by a magma chamber. Or is it? The attentive among you may now interject that just because we found a volcano in Guarma, that does not mean that the hot spring water was heated by a similar phenomenon. And to that I say, very good remark, you are absolutely right. Since I have no real indication of how far away Guarma is located from the Grizzlies, this is not conclusive evidence. Actually, scratch that. Considering Guarma as Puerto Rico and Saint Denis as New Orleans, which is what they are loosely based upon, the distance between these two spots is roughly 2,700 kilometers, which is way more than the up to a few hundred kilometers that two related magma chambers could be apart, and way more than I could reasonably argue away. So basically, we could not confirm anything, but at least we've gone on a nice holiday. Well, we've taken quite a detour, but we are right back where we started. Let's recap what we figured out so far. In Chapter 1 we found out that Valentine sits in a region that features marine sediments, showing us that there was previously an ocean on top of this land. In Chapter 2, we ventured north and found different kinds of rocks, mainly of magmatic origin. We've also seen that the speed at which those magmas cooled was different for the various locations we passed through, where the further up we went, the slower the cooling seemed to get. Right after that, we ran into a set of hot springs that immediately derailed the whole expedition and made me go into a frantic search for something that would explain them, a magma chamber. Then, in Chapter 3, the search took me quite far away to Guarma, where we learned about shield volcanoes, but ultimately could not find anything that would help confirm the hypothesis of the Katura magma chamber. Now, that would truly be a disappointing end to this video, which is why I've done further research. According to the Red Dead Redemption wiki, the Katura springs are modeled after the geysers and pools in Yellowstone National Park, and that means that, yes, indeed, they are powered by a magma chamber, which is fed by a so-called hotspot. A hotspot is a place where hot material from the mantle breaks through the Earth's crust. I was surprised to learn that there was dispute among scholars about the origin of the hotspot, whether it was caused by a mantle plume or the subduction of oceanic crust, which is the cause I had assumed to be responsible. This confused me as I realized that I had absolutely zero clue where Yellowstone was situated, which then prompted me to look it up and find out that it was incredibly far away from New Orleans, the city that Saint Denis is based upon, which in turn made me question the larger picture of Red Dead's geography. But let's leave that for future research and focus on the last point, the beautiful colors of these hot springs. I had initially assumed that those were mineral deposits, but it turns out the answer is far livelier than expected. The colorful areas surrounding the springs are covered in what is known as a biofilm. That is a community of single-cell organisms, bacteria and archaea, which stick to each other, surrounded by a slimy matrix that helps them exchange nutrients and other substances. The exact color is then dependent on the specific organisms living in the biofilm, where the dominant one changes with the season or temperature regime. During summer months, the red and orange ones are more prevalent, whereas during the winter months, green and bluish organisms take center stage. What fascinates me again and again in earth science is that something that appears simple at a surface level, like the color that we see, is governed by highly complex and lengthy processes in the background. Things like soils and rocks, even the air we breathe. All of these we take for given and granted, but actually none of them are, and I think there is beauty in that. It's this vastness of the world that keeps me wanting to learn and explore more, the reason I can't get enough of my field of study. And with that, I will have to conclude this video, since I do intend to release it at some point. If you liked what you saw and want to see more, do subscribe and maybe we'll see each other in one of my upcoming videos. There are 2 in the planning phase and their working titles are The Oldest Rock in Red Dead Redemption 2 and Is Biodiversity in Monster Hunter Wilds in Danger? And with that, thank you for granting me the privilege of your time, and until our paths cross again, I hope you have a wonderful time. That's gonna be it from my side. Goodbye.